Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your unfiltered fit BFF, mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify their fitness journey so they can lose weight, regain their confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Let's go. Hello there, fam. Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. I'm Nathalia Melo, your host. And before we get into today's topic, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you who are leaving 5-star reviews and leaving reviews on the podcast and the different platforms. I know that Apple Podcast is the only one that allows for written reviews. So thank you. Tell me what you like to hear more about, your favorite episode. Let other people know what is the value in listening to this, because there is so much nonsense and fuckery out there in the fitness space that I think it's very important to highlight and share the platforms, the creators that are putting content that are not sensationalizing stuff and they're not like extreme, because the pendulum swinging on both extremes without common sense is what is keeping so many people stuck. And that's the goal that I have with this podcast, to give information, to share my life experiences, the things I see as a coach, the things that I've seen in the fitness space, being in the fitness space for over 26 years and being a coach for over 15 years. I've seen a lot. I've had my own experiences with different diets and things like that. And if I can help at least one person not make a mistake that either I made or somebody else made, my job is done with this podcast. But again, I'm never going to be the one that is like making ridiculous promises, which sometimes restricts how far the message can go, because it's not, crazy or absurd enough. But I'd rather go slow and steady and win the race than to try to make ridiculous claims and harm people. So let me read a quick review here, and then we're going to go straight into the topic today. This review is actually from one of our members in the Powerhouse Academy. And no, I do not bribe our members with anything to leave reviews, okay? Okay, I know what you're thinking. She's leaving this review out of the goodness of her heart. I even actually forget to post the podcast in our group, which I shouldn't, but I do. Anyway, I digress. So this is from Fran Harris. Fran says, love this podcast. Nathalia, you're talking about me or speaking to me in every single episode. Thanks so much for your real talk and great advice. Thank you so much, Fran. Your transformation has been absolutely incredible. You're, kicking ass and taking names, and I'm very proud of you, especially knowing how our conversation started, which, is a very good segue to the reason why I'm doing this podcast today, this episode. I actually had something else planned for today, but yesterday I had a conversation that left me a bit sad. It left me a bit sad. So I spoke with this lady, and honestly, it broke my heart. The things that she was saying are things that I have experienced in the past, where you don't want to look at yourself in the mirror. She's noticing that her career is being impacted by not looking the way that she would like to, not feeling like herself. It is impacting her career. It is impacting her marriage. And then whenever I asked her, where do you think you're going to be? I don't know, in 6 months' time, if nothing changes. And she said, I honestly do not know, probably in medication for depression. And whenever she was describing her relationship with her kids, she doesn't have the energy to do stuff with her kids. She watches her husband play with her kids because she feels uncomfortable. She doesn't have the energy. One thing that she said that really caught my attention was she said, I'm paraphrasing, but it was along the lines of, I feel consumed by this in the sense of I'm always walking near mirrors because in my work, there is a lot of like mirrored windows and I have to look at myself and it puts me down. I'm always trying to like make myself smaller in a room because I don't want to be seen. Whenever I get home, I'm constantly being reminded about how unfit and unlike myself I am because I can't keep up with my kids. I don't want to have sex with my husband. And the feeling of feeling consumed is something that I'm incredibly familiar with. And that's one thing that I feel a lot of people don't realize. Whenever we're talking about fat loss and muscle gain or, dropping a size or whatever, there is a huge focus on the weight, which is important. Listen, we can try to pretend that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It does matter. But there is a lot of emphasis being put on the weight or the clothing size or how you're going to look in a bikini or whatever. But there isn't a lot of conversation around the freedom, around the peace, that not constantly thinking about it, and not constantly thinking about how you already messed up your nutrition, how you don't feel comfortable in your clothes, how you don't want to look in a mirror. And it is a constant. And I think that a lot of people don't understand how much of their brain power is being consumed by just the constant thought of feeling unhappy and unfulfilled with the way that they look. I want to make it very clear that this isn't about the look. One thing that I've noticed is that the look is a byproduct of not honoring yourself, not honoring the promises that you've made to yourself on the things that you told yourself that you were going to do. Like, oh, I'm going to train at least 3 times a week. And then you don't do that. You feel like a failure. And then you keep on beating yourself up and reminding yourself about how much you like, quote unquote, suck because you told yourself that you're going to do this. And then it just becomes this snowball. Whenever you feel like you did something wrong and there is that constant cloud that follows you around, that's a bit how it feels. And the reason I know this is because I have been there. So I remember, and I'm going to get very vulnerable with this story here because a lot of people come talk to me and they're like, hey, I would love to look lean and I would love to build muscle. I would like to have shoulders like you, which I appreciate. Thank you. And obviously this is an industry that it is, based on image. So yeah, I like, thank you. And I'm not saying this, you're like, oh, yeah, I think that I'm just so high. Blah, 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 blah. That's not it. It's just that these are things that I hear. And while I appreciate that, I want to share a bit of a different perspective that is not talked about enough. I think that before we talked about this, I need to go back to the beginning. I remember before I was competing, I had always had a big struggle with maintaining something. I was always like more on the slim side, but it was always with the strategies that would be a bit more aggressive because I grew up in a home where my mom was always doing the next cool diet, the cabbage soup diet, the paleo, the Atkins, whatever like bullshit was coming out at the time. My mom was always doing it and, getting plastic surgeries. I don't even remember how many plastic surgeries my mom got done. So this is the environment in which I grew up. So I always felt very trapped by my body in the context of that looking a certain way was always going to be something that was done just for the way that you look and not for the way that you feel. And then you feel trapped. And then I got into competing. I got into bodybuilding and I loved my experience competing, made me grow a lot. And it made me a much more resilient person and it built my grit. I'm not going to speak only negatively about something that really has helped me become a much better person and a much better professional. But my relationship with food at that time was terrible. And I was already coming from an environment where disordered eating behaviors were very normalized, and, body dysmorphia was very normalized. So I remember, feeling incredibly anxious at the time that I was, dieting very hard, and my weight was constantly fluctuating significantly when I was competing because everything was so extreme. And if I was skinny, I was lean, about to get in a competition, I couldn't go to a restaurant because I wasn't, quote unquote, allowed to eat the foods that they were serving. And then if I were not in competition, I felt incredibly anxious about even just being invited to go to a restaurant because I didn't know how to eat. I didn't know what I was going to wear because I didn't know if that day I was going to have gained, 15, 20 pounds after my show, or if I was still going to be in a similar way because I didn't know. I felt very consumed by the thought of food all the time, and about the thought of, I had the fat closet and I had the skinny closet, and not knowing at what point I was going to transition from one closet to the next. That was something that consumed a lot of my thoughts. It's almost like half of my brain. A lot of it was consumed by this constant narrative that was going on in the background, that noise. For nearly a decade, I avoided taking photos with family and friends. I was embarrassed. I tried looking at my social the other day. Somebody was like, "Oh, what did you look before you started like competing, or on your off season whenever you were competing?" I wouldn't be able to tell you because I have very few photos of myself in a swimming suit. It's hard to compare because I don't have it. And that is not just because I forgot. It's because I intentionally didn't take photos because I felt uncomfortable. I remember vividly one time that my husband, Roger, we did long distance relationship for 2.5 years. He lived in England and I lived in South Florida at the time. There is another episode if you're curious on how we met. There is an episode, is one of the first ones. I'll put in the show notes, that some of his friends were coming and we were going to go to a pool party. And I was, 132 pounds, maybe, which for me, I was like already like, oh my goodness, because I competed at about 120. So I was already like 12 pounds over. I was so consumed. The thought of going to a pool party and walk around in a bikini made me so anxious that I remember I took like, what were they? Like a bunch of diuretics and stuff to make me look smaller whenever I went to a freaking pool party. And I couldn't think about anything else because my brain was so consumed by what am I going to eat when I'm there? Like, what if they want to go to a restaurant? It was always playing in the back of my mind. And I turned down opportunities, trips. I turned down work opportunities, speaking engagements, photo shoots, to shoot with like some cool photographers around the world. I turned down opportunities like that because I felt like I wasn't looking how I should be looking. And are people looking and are people judging? And I understand that because my body was a big part of my identity due to the sports, but this is not something that I see happening just with people that compete at that level. With a lot of the women that I speak to, they're just women that go to work and that at some point they were fairly fit or, had a good grip of their fitness. Something happened along the way and things got derailed and they don't know how to get things back on track. And it is something that keeps on playing in the back of their mind. And it wasn't until I met my husband. Okay. That was kind of like the beginning of the come to Jesus moment for me. I met my husband. My husband was a professional rugby player. And I found it very interesting because even though he was a high level athlete, Roger was, he played professionally for 15 years and he was a pretty damn good player, but he had a normal life. He would go out to restaurants and he would have a drink and he would, hang out with his friends, and he didn't have the fat closet, skinny closet. He just had his clothes. And in my mind, I was like, oh no, but it's just because like he's a man, it's different. But then I start to think about it and I'm like, but he's still a professional athlete at the highest level, because I thought in my mind that the way that I was feeling was normal. It was just something that like everybody like just experienced. And that maybe for me, it was different because I was an athlete. And then like I was experiencing that. Like I thought it was normal for anybody who was doing things at a very high level to feel the way that I felt. And then I met Roger, and Roger, he was living his best life, you know? And I was like, that's interesting. But I was still not fully convinced the way that I was doing things weren't optimum. And throughout, I was always feeling very consumed. If Roger came to me and he's like, hey, let's go on a trip. I needed notice to go on a trip because I had to get ready for the trip and I had to go on this like crazy ass diet. And there are trips that I barely remember like the actual trip because I was feeling uncomfortable because, you know, things were out of my control and we had to eat in restaurants and oh my goodness, how much weight am I going to eat? Like it robbed me of so much joy. You've robbed me of so many memories. You've robbed me of so many opportunities to just be. It was almost like there was always a noise going on in the back of my mind and I had no peace. I was happy, but I had no peace. I was happy in the season of life that I was in, planning to move and start a family and all that jazz. But it was still very consuming and it was very, really, I had no peace. And I watched Roger, but I was like, okay, maybe the things that I'm doing, the way that I'm doing might not be great, but I'm going to keep on doing because that's the way I know how to do it. And whenever I got pregnant with my son, who was my first child, I was still very much stuck on that all or nothing mentality. I was significantly better than what I had been, but it was still something that lived rent-free in the back of my mind. Not to the extent as before, but it still lived there. And then I had my daughter. It was between 13, 14 months. I can't remember. It's a blur. As my daughter started to kind of, you know, turn 1 and turn 2, and they start to kind of like do funny things, and you start to remember things about your childhood. And at that time, things had already improved, but it's almost like I didn't really have a very strong driving force, like very clear to not go backwards. Because, you know, even though I was significantly better, there were still times that, you know, the extreme eating behaviors and the noise was still lingering. Oh, you know, maybe this one time I'm going to do extra, or, oh, I'm not going to take a day off from working out because go hard or go home, like that kind of mentality. And as I started looking at my daughter, I couldn't help but to see myself as a young child, because a lot of the memories that I have with watching my mom's struggle, I was young. Like, I don't remember how old exactly I was, but I was probably just like around the age that my daughter is now. And I remember seeing a lot of things that my mom did, the way that she spoke about her body. And sometimes she didn't even have to speak. It was just the way that she looked at herself in the mirror, the way that she didn't look at herself, or the way that she dressed when I knew that she had just come from a diet and she was feeling skinny for like that week, how she dressed, how she carried herself, and how she also carried herself whenever the weight came back on, and how whenever she felt more insecure in her body. I don't remember my mom saying a lot of things about herself, but I remember watching her and seeing how noticeable it was to the change, and how whenever she wasn't where she wanted to be, how consumed, how snappy she was, how less tolerant and more impatient she became. And I'm no poster child of patience. I'm going to put that out there. But, you know, I want to do better for my kids. And the fact that at the time that I had this epiphany, I was in my early 30s. I'm 40 now. But I was in my early 30s when it clicked. When it clicked, I already felt good in my body then when it clicked. But the click for me was understanding that it wasn't about the body. It wasn't about the weighing X, Y, and Z. It wasn't about that. It was about feeling. it was about not wanting to teach my daughter or to let my daughter remember whenever she is in her 30s that taking care of your body is something that consumes you, that it is something that impacts the quality of life of the family, and that, mom's moods is going to be dependent on what she weighed that day or how well her diet is working or not working. And she's going to get in the pool with me or go to the park with me if she feels good that day in her body, because if she doesn't want to wear shorts and it's hot outside, it's going to be somebody else that is going to take me. I didn't want that to be the memory that my children, my daughter, had of me, of her childhood. And this is a question that I ask often. And I'm not saying, listen, I'm no picture of like Mother Earth, and I'm doing the best that I can with what I have. But I learned from watching my mother, just watching her, watching what she did, the way that she spoke with herself, the way that her body image and her instability of her body image impacted how she showed up as a mother, how she showed up to do things, and how snappy she was, on how happy she was. He was always the dictator of how she was going to show up that day. And I didn't want my daughter to watch that, because I can see now how that impacted how I came to be. My own relationship with food for a long time, my own relationship with my body, my own relationship with the feeling of not being where I want to be physically. And I asked myself, I'm like, would I be okay seeing my daughter grow up feeling the same way that I felt about my body because I watched my mom do the same? Because if the answer is no, which obviously it was no, it is my job to change not just the way I look, but the strategies that I use so that I can also change the way I feel. Because a lot of times, I can pull a zillion photos of when I was competing and when I was doing stuff for magazines and, all of those things. I look great, but I felt like shit. I had zero peace. I had zero freedom. If somebody invited me to go to a restaurant, I would either turn down because I didn't know how to behave like a normal human being in a restaurant and not eat for a family of 25, or I would just sit there and be miserable because I didn't know when to stop. And my mind was always thinking about, what if somebody invites me to go to a restaurant? Or what if that's no way to live. I don't want my daughter to go through that. But in order for her to grow up knowing that there is a different way of doing it, I need to lead by example. I need to be that person that I would like her to become. Because if you want your child, and now I'm speaking boy or girl, to take care of their bodies, because it is the healthy thing to do, not because it should be a punishment, not because you're beating yourself into shape, not that. But if you want your kids to take care of their bodies because they love themselves so much that they know the right thing to do is to take care of that one body that you have to live for the rest of your life, that looking a certain way shouldn't be something that has an expiration date, and it isn't something that should be consuming every second of your day. This is the example that I want to set for my kids. But the only way for me to set the example that I didn't have is by me becoming that. Because if I keep on acting the same way that I grew up, and again, we're not throwing shade at my mom. She didn't know better. And that's the thing. She didn't know better, but I do. Because I know what he did to me. So why the hell am I going to repeat that same thing with my children? I'm not. So whenever somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, Nathalia, I would love to look lean like this. That's great. I have plenty of pictures that I look lean. I feel like shit. What I think that a lot of people don't understand is how absolutely amazing it feels to not be thinking about food 24/7, to not be feeling consumed about not being able to do a full workout and just do, 20 minutes because that's all you get, and not feel like you suck and not beat yourself up because you haven't been able to be perfect, to, not be pressured by doing everything right all the time whenever it comes to my fitness, by enjoying what I'm doing, by being able to say yes to having an ice cream with my children without feeling guilt that I'm like, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, that I'm cheating on my diet. I'm not cheating on my diet. I'm having a good time with my kids and eating something that they enjoy. And I'm going to have the damn ice cream without any guilt. And the thing is that a lot of women don't have that. How do I know? Because I speak with them every single day. Change is only going to happen when you change. Change for you and change for the future of your kids. Because if you're giving everything that you have to everybody around you with only operating with like half of your brain, because the other half is always consumed about how uncomfortable you are living in your body and how little time you have to dedicate to yourself, how would that make you feel to see your daughter falling apart the way that you are and still trying to give everything for everyone? Would you be proud? Because I sure as hell wouldn't, because she's giving what she doesn't have. And that's what a lot of women are doing. And then they get, their kids leave their house and things like that. And then they're blaming their kids for their inaction or for their feeling of inadequacy in their bodies. And by that consuming thought and that feeling of defeat that they have, when in reality, it's not your kid's fault. It is your fault because you didn't take ownership to create change. And it is exhausting to live with that thought in your mind all the time. I know because I have been there. And it's sad because whenever I'm speaking with some women, one of the questions that I ask is like, hey, when was the last time that you felt your best? Like, oh, it was, 5 years ago. Awesome. Cool. If I were to go back then and ask you, did you ever think that you were going to be here having this conversation with me? That's a question I ask everybody. The answers go, absolutely not. It never even crossed my mind. Like I thought I had it all figured out. Or they will say, honestly, I never even thought about it because I just wore whatever I wanted and I left the house and I ate what I wanted. And I'm like, right. It was something that you just did. And how freeing was that? How freeing was that to get a phone call and the person was like, hey, do you want to do this? And you're like, sure, hold on, be right back. And then you could just walk into your closet and put whatever the hell you want and walk out of the door. And you didn't have to think for like 3 months about the diet that you had to go to be able to fit on that dress. You see what I'm saying? So if you take anything from this episode, this is probably like one of the most from the heart podcasts that I have ever done, because I think that a lot of the things that I talk about is getting lost in quote unquote translation in the sense of, oh, you must want to have a six pack. Oh, you need to want to weigh X. Oh, you need to want to have your life look like this. I don't care how much you end up weighing. I don't care what size clothes you wear. I don't care. What I do care is that your life is not consumed from the moment you open your eyeballs to the moment you go to bed by what clothes you're going to wear to work that day that you don't feel uncomfortable. What outfit or what excuse you're going to give to skip in an event that you've been invited to because you feel uncomfortable in your body. What excuse you're going to give your husband as to why you cannot have sex tonight when we know full well that the reason why you're not having sex is because you feel uncomfortable. You don't want to be seen naked. And some people might listen to this and be like, oh my God, Nathalia, that's so harsh. No, that's not harsh. That's the truth. That's the truth. And I know this because I speak with women every single day. But more than that, I know it's true because I have been there. And I used to make every excuse under the sun to justify my feeling, not how I look, but my feeling, saying that it was normal. But it was my normal because that's all I had known for the past, 10 years. It was my normal. But now that I'm on the other side, that shit's not normal. Thinking about food and about what you're going to wear and about the event and how you're going to hide in the next photo. And that shit's not normal. It's exhausting. But change is only going to happen when you decide to stop focusing just on the next diet that is going to get you to look a certain way, on the next workout plan that you're going to find on the internet that's going to get you there. Because what you're looking for is not just the diet and the workout, it's the feeling of freedom to not have to think about it 24/7. And that is going to take time. That is going to take, understanding your life where it's at right now. You can keep on putting it off, but it is going to come to bite you in the ass. And you're just procrastinating. You're just pushing it back, something that you're going to have to address at some point. I don't care what anybody says. That is going to have to be addressed at some point. Because what's going to happen, you're probably going to end up resenting your partner. You're going to end up resenting your work. You're going to end up resenting your kids. It's not their fault. It's a choice that you get to make every single day. And nobody can make that choice other than you. And I know that you can. So if you need just a little push to make the decision to not just focus on looking a certain way, but feeling a certain way. The feeling of peace, the feeling of being free from the cycle, that anxiety that comes whenever you get to your goal with some kind of measure, but you know that you cannot maintain. So even when you look good, you're already freaking out because you know that it's just going to be a matter of a couple months and you're going to go back to where you started because you haven't learned how to get there and stay there. And that constant fear is exhausting. So I want to finish the story with the lady from yesterday that I had the call with. We talked, and then she said work's very busy and she doesn't know if she's going to be able to fully commit to taking care of herself. And that is what breaks my heart. Because for that lady, it's been going on for years. 6.5 years to be exact. I've spoken with ladies that this has been going on for 10 years, 15 years, 5 years. How much more of your life are you going to miss out on and not be able to be fully present and fully invested because you just keep on pushing it to that perfect imaginary day that nobody knows when it is? The time is now, because we are in the last quarter of the year. And I want you to do your own checks and balances. Are you where you'd like to be? How much of your resolutions from the beginning of the year have you accomplished? If you have accomplished a lot of them, amazing. Well done. But I know that that's not the case for a lot of people. So at what time does change really begin? Are we going to wait for January again? That hasn't worked. The time is now. And only you can take control of yourself and your habits and your choices to create change. So if you need a sign, then let this episode be it. You can change. It's not easy. It's simple. It's a simple process. It's not easy. Anybody that is telling you that is going to be a walk in the park, it's full of crap. It's more like Jurassic Park, but it is something that you're going to have to address one way or the other. So take control of your health, take control of your thoughts, and understand that you don't have to live like this forever. Okay? If you'd like to chat with me and see what it would look like for you, there is a link in the description where you can, schedule a call. We can chat. We can map out something for you. If I don't think I can help you, I'll tell you. Like I have said to many ladies before. In fact, there is an episode with one of our members that the first time that she came to us, I actually told her that I I couldn't help her. I didn't think that I was the right coach for her at that time. So I'll always be very transparent. But if you feel like you're feeling lost and you don't know where to begin, you don't know where to start, you don't know what to do because you're so far from what you've known yourself as, book a call. Let's chat. If I don't think I can help you, I'll point you in a better direction, give you a free resource, whatever that is. But let's at least get the ball rolling on something. Okay? Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment or voice message at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on Instagram and let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. As for today, this is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.